What's up Top 10 fam, hope you're having an awesome day. I'm your host Ayman Hassan and welcome back to another video. Now this video was honestly a complete surprise to me. I was thinking about what scary masks I could possibly include on the list, but boy, oh boy, did this really open my eyes. I pretty much didn't know any of these existed except one, so I'm pretty chuffed about this list, and you guys should be too. Prepare to be enlightened, folks. I'm about to hit you with some knowledge. Anyway, these are the top 10 scary masks used in history. Starting us off at number 10 is the dirt-eating mask. Now geophagy is actually a thing for people who don't know what it is. It means the practice of eating soil, earth-like substances like chalk, clay, or dirt. It's obviously not as common now, but back in the 16th to 19th centuries it was very popular amongst slaves. They picked up the habit in West Africa, and it was such a well-known thing that people would gather and trade the more favored varieties of dirt. It was like a delicacy. Either way, slave owners were told by physicians that geophagy would give their slaves stomach aches, depression, shortness of breath, vertigo, etc. So to protect their property, slave owners would make them wear these disturbing mouth-blocking masks to stop them from eating dirt. Now the masks were made of metal and went around their faces like this, and there was this one metal plane in front attaching to the top of their heads while covering their noses. The bottom mouth part was like a cheese grater, but I guess less holes and obviously molded to the jaw shape. But the catch was they had to wear them 24/7 even when they were out working in the dangerously hot conditions they were in. We'd realize now there's actually no real consensus on whether the act is harmful or not, and by the act I mean, you know, eating dirt, so this so-called mask cure was useless and just plain cruel. Coming in at number 9 are the splatter masks. Now these look like the masks worn if the prisoners in the Tower of London were somehow hybrids with the people in Chernobyl. Maybe that's just some imagery that I understand. They honestly look like some tortured chainmail mask, but they were actually the opposite. These splatter masks were used for protection by British tank operators during the 1917 Battle of Cambrai in World War I. Since that was one of the first tank battles in history, the tank's engineering was just beginning, and so the vehicles weren't as sturdy as they are now. They broke down constantly, they could easily be destroyed with heavy artillery fire, and they moved about as fast as you and I walk. So there's that. Hence, anyone who was in the tank was highly vulnerable to getting killed or shot or having shards of whatever the hell hit them in the face. So these half leather, half chainmail masks were essentially these people's only defense against a rampage of oncoming bullets. Brilliant. I don't trust that. I would not put my life I would not trust my life to these masks. Sorry. At number 8 we have Alexander PEDENS mask. Now this mask literally looks like a knockoff version of Michael Myers' mask from Halloween. It's got the hair attached, even a beard, the skin part is made from leather and cloth, and at one point the mask even had fake teeth attached. So who was Alexander and why did he wear this mask? So back in the 1600s, a group of Scottish Presbyterians were members of the Covenanters movement, which were people who believed they'd signed a covenant between them and God. They refused to accept the king as head of the church, claiming they'd only accept Jesus. So with those bold opinions, the group made some bold enemies, one being Charles I and his successor Charles II. Now soon after, a period called the Killing Times took place, which included government troops hunting down these illegal preachers in the movement and killing them. Alex was one of the most well-known illegal preachers and one of the most wanted men in Scotland. He wore the mask to hide his identity from the troops. He was on the run at all times, living in caves, preaching in secret places all over Scotland. It was a hard life. Another theory about the mask suggested that a younger, faster member of the movement would wear the mask and lure the troops away from Peden. Regardless of why the mask was used, he was captured in 1673, and that was the end of that. The mask is actually still on display in Edinburgh's Museum of Scotland if you want to see it. I do not. It's creepy. I can live my whole life without seeing that. Filling our number 7 slot are death masks. Yes, they're exactly what you're thinking they are. The practice of death masks has been around since ancient Egypt and Rome and was still popular during the 20th century. Before photographs were a thing, artists and sculptors would use death masks to depict the famous or royal people. The masks were made during the first few hours after someone died with plaster or wax and were eerily and creepily accurate. The oldest European death mask belonged to Edward III, who was the King of England for some time. Don't know when. They were used for forensic purposes, religious ceremonies, sometimes just for mementos. There are death masks of Napoleon, Lincoln, Beethoven, Nikola Tesla, and Mary Queen of Scots, so I mean we have a variety of dead people to choose from and view. Like, I get it, they had to make them for memorabilia or science or whatever, but replicas of people's death faces? Like, who thought of that? Who literally thought that was a good idea? Because I can assure you, it wasn't. Now at number 6 is the Plague Doctor mask. I don't think this mask needs a real introduction. I feel like everyone has seen it and knows what it looks like, but if you've been living under a rock, this mask was worn by doctors in the 14th century and they had a long curved beak and black, just soulless eyes. Now initially the first bubonic plague outbreak was in the 6th century, but the most famous one was in Europe during the 14th century. 200 million people died, which is literally 2/3 of the continent's population. That's a lot of people, bro. Either way, at this time, plague doctors became very valuable since not many people had the balls to treat the sick in this epidemic. They were so in demand that they'd actually get kidnapped and held hostage, and the city they were from had to pay the ransom for their release, and they'd bloody do it because people were dying. And despite the costume and mask looking super dramatic, they did have reasoning behind it. Back then, they believed you'd catch the disease if you breathed the air, so the long beak would be stuffed with strong smelling spices and herbs which would make the poisonous air safe to breathe. The heavy waxed coat would get tucked into the mask to lock the air out, then you have the hat, and of course the cane which would let them examine patients without touching them. The suits probably did do their job and work. They most likely kept the disease spreading fleas away from the doctor's skin, and that's a good thing. And honestly, these plague doctors are everywhere in Assassin's Creed 2. It's so funny, I love it. Like, every time I see them I'm like, oh. Coming in at number 5 is the toilet mask, and I promise this is not what it sounds like. I mean, it sort of is, but it isn't. Back in the 1890s, Madame Helen Rowley, a milliner and dressmaker in Ohio, patented the toilet mask. She claimed it was a mask for medical purposes and was meant to be worn when you were asleep. It was made from India rubber, and honestly, it wasn't even scary looking, it was just weird. It was this white mask that was meant to bleach, beautify, and preserve the complexion according to the advertisement. The mask was meant to relieve pores and moisturize the skin, and also apply medical preparations to the face to minimize spots. Real talk, honestly, this toilet mask is really just the first ever face mask that she's trying to sell the of. So instead of a 10-minute wear and take off, it was like an all-night mask, which is the only real difference I can see between modern ones and this one. I mean, most face masks now don't bleach your face, but I'm sure you could get ones that do. At this point, the only thing the toilet mask probably left you with was a pruny face and skin fungus, possibly. So nothing that was promised in the advertisement, basically. At number 4 is the CAPIROTE, and I know by name you guys won't know what I'm talking about at all, but if I say think of what the KKK wore, you're gonna think about those white robes and those creepy pointed hats, and you'd be right. These hooded masks were originally part of a Spanish Catholic celebration before the KKK adopted them and ruined the hell out of them. The pointed hat was just meant to be stupid, and in medieval times was mostly worn by jugglers or jesters, and in more modern times they were used as a dunce hat. So throughout history they've been used to humiliate and punish people essentially, like criminals would have to walk the streets wearing pointed hats, while people threw at them and yelled at them. During the Inquisition, if you were condemned, you would be wearing a pointed hat so people would know you were marked. The hats were adopted by the Spanish when they wore them to repent for their sins and earn forgiveness. The tradition is still actually ongoing, and sometimes during Easter people in Spain will wear them and go outside. Different colors are associated with different churches, and it's not just white like you'd think, so despite the KKK link, it's not actually connected at all. Filling our number 3 slot are the masks of shame. Now these masks were German, and they were a form of punishment used during the 17th and 18th centuries. They're not just scary, they're just plain weird. They're made from goldish looking metal, but like obviously not from real gold, and they look like donkeys, got a big snout, the pointed ears, and 6 flowers randomly on the mask, but they all varied based on the individual sin you committed. People were forced to wear these masks for the stupidest reason: if they were caught making a dirty joke, or gossiping, or making any sort of social faux pas. If you were gossiping, your mask would feature a long tongue, a dirty joke joke would mean a huge pig's nose, being a fool would mean the donkey ears. The point of making people wear these ugly heavy ass masks was essentially just to embarrass them as much as possible. Some of the masks even made this high pitched whistling sound every time the person breathed out to add further salt to their wound. Some of them even had a metal bit pressing down on the person's tongue so they'd find it hard to talk. The Germans, man, they come up with ideas. Questionable. Now at number 2 are baby gas masks. These masks weren't even masks, they were legit little astronaut helmets, and you were about to throw your baby the hell up into orbit. Now during World War I and II, the baby versions of gas masks made these babies look like they were about to either go scuba diving or step onto Mars for the first time. Like there's no in between. And they weren't easy to throw on either. For them to work, the parent or adult had to consistently push the manual air pump, which sounds like not the biggest priority if you just get bombed per se. Like you're not gonna be like, oh hold on a minute. No, don't have time for that, run for your life. America tried to put a cute twist on it by giving kids Mickey Mouse gas masks, and they were meant to be less scary, and if anything they were actually more creepy. Like I'm not here to see all these hordes of kids staring at me with those Mickey blank glass eyes. No. Off you go. And finally, at number 1 is Iroquois' False Face Society mask. Almost every indigenous culture has their own ritualistic or religious masks. They're colourful, they're provoking, and sometimes can be scary in their own right. According to this website, the scariest one is worn by the False Face Society, which is one of many medicinal groups within the Iroquois tribes. Tribe members go to the False Face Society as a last resort when there's literally no other healing societies that can heal the patient. Now it's not the mask itself that's scary, they're honestly fine, it's the fact they're meant to be the living embodiment of a spirit, and that is not a joke, people. There are very strict protocols surrounding how to take care of these wooden bodies, including anointing the masks with animal grease and oil, burning tobacco in their honor, and feeding them white corn mush. I mean, I didn't know masks could eat, but I'm gonna believe it, honestly, I'll believe it. Healers wear the masks and then perform extremely violent pantomimes of demons being released and banished from the victim's body. And that's basically how it goes. And that's all for today's video, guys. Honestly, other than the Plague Doctor mask, I didn't know about any of these, so I'm glad I learnt a lot, and hopefully you guys did too. Teacher Eamon back at it again. Let me know which mask you thought was scariest in the comments below, and as always, I'm your host Eamon Hassan, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!